Hello, and welcome to The Brief Insight, your go to podcast for breaking down the latest trends, research, and policies shaping our world. Whether you're passionate about sustainability, global economics, or emerging innovations, this is where we simplify complex ideas to keep you informed and inspired. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone looking for insights that matter. We're here every Monday and Friday, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you sharp, relevant content that sparks conversation. Thank you for tuning into The Brief Insight. Now let's dive into today's topic.
All right, so let's jump into this whole digital nomad thing.
Yeah.
You've given us a really interesting mix of sources here.
Yeah.
We've got academic papers,
Yeah.
opinion pieces, even a YouTube video about
Yeah.
digital nomads in Cape Town.
Right.
It seems like you're interested in the lifestyle, but also the impact,
Yes.
especially the tax side of things,
Absolutely.
and whether it's all fair.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big one.
Huge question, right?
It is a timely topic.
Yeah.
I mean, did you know that by 2018, the U.S. alone had an estimated 4.8 million digital nomads?
Wow.
And that's not even counting the remote workers who aren't constantly on the move.
Yeah.
This is changing how we work and live.
It really is. And these sources show everyone's trying to figure it out. Governments, individuals, everyone.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're tackling how are digital nomads changing the world? Are they modern day explorers?
Yeah.
Or are they contributing to a new form of colonialism? And maybe the biggest question, how do you tax someone who's constantly traveling?
Big questions for sure.
Yeah.
And thankfully, your sources offer some pretty insightful perspectives.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
First things first, what is a digital nomad these days?
Okay.
It feels like it's more than just a travel blogger with a laptop, right?
Absolutely. We're looking at a whole range of remote workers,
Okay.
freelancers, grabbing gigs online,
Mm-hmm.
full-time employees working for global companies from some beach in Thailand,
Right.
web developers, designers, writers, virtual assistants. So many possibilities.
And as traditional jobs get disrupted,
Yeah.
the tax systems get disrupted too.
Exactly.
The sources mention the gig economy really shaking up that traditional pay-as-you-earn tax system.
Yeah.
There's even an anecdote in the Russian research paper about bloggers that really struck me.
Oh, really?
Russian internet companies were upset that foreign companies
Wow.
weren't withholding taxes from payments to their Russian bloggers.
Interesting.
I mean, where does the tax liability lie in a case like that?
It's a tricky question.
Yeah.
It really blurs the line. Are these digital nomads employees or self-employed?
Right.
That distinction has a huge impact on how they should be taxed.
Okay, so let's talk about the economics of this whole location independence thing.
Okay?
It seems obvious that digital nomads can boost local economies by
Yeah.
spending money on housing, food fund.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's not all positive, right?
You're picking up what these sources are putting down.
Okay.
The YouTube video, How Digital Nomads Ruin Cape Town, gets right to the point.
Okay.
Gentrification.
Yeah.
It highlights how an influx of higher-earning digital nomads can inflate prices and displace local residents.
So the digital nomads come and demand increases.
Right.
And suddenly locals can't afford to live in their own city anymore.
It's a real concern.
Wow.
The video uses Cape Town as a case study,
Okay.
how the demand for short-term rentals like Airbnbs has driven up housing costs dramatically.
Yeah.
Get this, Cape Town currently has more Airbnb listings than Amsterdam, San Francisco, and Singapore combined.
Wow, that's wild. I knew Airbnb was popular, but that really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
And it's not just Cape Town, is it?
Right.
This video suggests that other cities popular with digital nomads are feeling this pressure too.
Your sources highlight Amsterdam, San Francisco, and Singapore
Okay.
as cities where concerns about the impact of digital nomads on housing markets are growing.
Got it.
It's one of those situations with unintended consequences.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got this potential upside economic benefits for the places these nomads visit,
Right.
but we've also got the risk of driving up prices and pushing out locals.
Uh-huh.
What about the nomads themselves?
Yeah.
How does this lifestyle affect how they pay taxes?
Ah, yes. The age-old question.
Yeah.
Where does the tax man cometh when you're a citizen of the world?
Right.
Our current tax rules are based on residency.
Mm-hmm.
But that gets complicated quickly with someone who's always on the go.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It can be.
And I remember that one of the authors of the academic study you provided
Yes.
actually experienced this firsthand.
Oh.
They moved countries temporarily
Yeah.
and ran into a ton of complications trying to sort out their tax obligations.
It really highlights the clash between this new way of working and our outdated systems.
So what are countries doing to try and keep up?
Well, there's no one solution that fits everyone.
Right.
Countries are experimenting with different approaches to taxing digital nomads and gig workers.
Okay.
Russia, for example, has special tax regimes for sole proprietors and the self-employed, which it can benefit non-residents.
Interesting. So a digital nomad could potentially benefit from being in Russia.
Potentially.
Yes.
Okay, what about other countries?
The Czech Republic, France, and Singapore are also mentioned in your sources as having specific rules and requirements for independent workers.
Okay.
The U.S. system is interesting, too.
How so?
They require companies to issue Form 1099s for payments made to individuals outside of traditional employment.
It's a way for the IRS to keep tabs on that income.
Got it. So it definitely sounds like governments are scrambling to keep up with this whole digital nomad phenomenon.
Yeah, they're trying to adapt.
But it's not just about the nuts and bolts of taxes, is it?
Right.
There are some pretty big ethical questions about digital nomadism.
Yes.
This whole idea of neocolonialism. You're right.
A big one.
And your sources, especially the Medium article and the Verdict opinion piece, offer contrasting viewpoints on this very complex issue.
Absolutely.
So give me the main arguments. What are the concerns people are raising?
Well, on the one hand, you have people arguing that digital nomadism perpetuates those colonial power dynamics.
Okay.
You know, wealthy Westerners coming in and potentially exploiting communities in developing countries.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have digital nomads themselves saying, hey, we're not all like that.
Yeah.
We're trying to be responsible. We're engaging with local communities. We're contributing to the economy.
Right. It's a really nuanced conversation.
It is.
And it's one that we need to have.
Absolutely.
So let's dig into those different perspectives a little deeper.
Okay.
What are the specific examples and arguments being made on both sides?
So the verdict piece really lays out the case against digital nomadism as it currently exists.
Okay.
They argue that it often mirrors those colonial patterns of exploitation,
Okay.
you know, taking more than you give.
Right.
They highlight how most digital nomads come from wealthier Western nations, and they tend to choose destinations where their money goes a lot further.
Yeah.
But that can lead to rising costs for the locals,
Right.
making it harder for them to afford basic things like housing.
Okay, so they're benefiting from that disparity.
Exactly.
Got it.
They used Medellin, Colombia as an example.
Okay.
Activists there are pushing back against this influx of digital nomads, saying they're driving up rent prices and pushing residents out of their own neighborhoods.
And that verdict piece uses the term neocolonialism pretty deliberately.
Yeah, they are.
They're suggesting that even if it's unintentional,
Right.
these nomads are benefiting from systems that perpetuate global inequalities.
A powerful argument.
It is a pretty harsh assessment.
Yeah.
And then that YouTube video about Cape Town reinforced those concerns. The way they showed how the demand for Airbnbs has skyrocketed housing costs,
Yeah.
forcing locals out. It's a tough reality.
It is. But remember, the Medium article, Neocolonialism and the Dark Underbelly of the Digital Nomad Movement,
Yeah.
offered a slightly different perspective.
It did, yeah. The author, a long-term digital nomad herself, acknowledged the potential for harm,
Right.
but also argued that there are ways to engage with these communities
Yeah.
that can benefit both sides.
She emphasized being mindful of your impact.
Okay.
You know, not just coming in and expecting things to adapt to your needs,
Right.
but actually trying to understand and respect the local culture.
I see. So kind of meeting them where they are.
Exactly.
Okay.
And she put a lot of emphasis on self-awareness. Being sensitive to cultural differences
Okay.
and having a genuine desire to learn from and contribute to the places you visit.
And she even shared some personal stories about her own mistakes and how she learned from them.
Yes, she did.
Like initially, she resisted hiring local help for things like housework because she didn't want to come across as, the rich foreigner dictating to the locals.
Right, a valid concern.
Yeah.
But she eventually realized that by trying to be totally self-sufficient,
Yeah.
she was actually preventing herself from connecting with the community in a deeper way.
I see.
She ended up hiring a local woman to teach her how to weave.
That's a great example of how getting to know people on a personal level can break down those preconceived notions.
It is.
And the author highlighted other examples, too. of digital nomads who are really making an effort to integrate responsibly.
Like supporting local businesses, learning the language,
Right.
even launching projects that help empower marginalized groups.
Those are really encouraging examples.
They are.
And they highlight that maybe the key takeaway here is that digital nomadism itself isn't inherently good or bad.
Right.
It's about the choices each individual makes and how they interact with the communities they join, even temporarily.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that you can have a negative impact. Being aware of that and making a conscious decision to be a responsible global citizen.
Well said.
So if you're thinking about becoming a digital nomad, it's crucial to really examine your motivations and the potential impact you might have.
Ask yourself some tough questions.
Yeah. Like what?
How can I minimize any negative effects and actually contribute something positive to the communities I visit? Can I afford to live and work in a way that doesn't displace locals or drive up prices?
Right.
How can I engage with the culture respectfully?
Those are great questions. And if you're a policymaker,
Yes.
the question becomes, what kinds of tax systems and regulations can we create that ensure everyone has a fair shot in this new world of work?
Yeah. How do we encourage responsible digital nomadism that benefits both the individuals and the communities?
These are questions that will only become more pressing as more and more people embrace this lifestyle.
Absolutely.
This conversation is far from over.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we have. But hopefully this has given our listeners some food for thought.
I hope so.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Very true.
But it's one that we need to keep talking about.
I agree.
So let's move on to the next big question.
Okay.
How do you actually tax someone who's constantly on the move?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And thankfully, your sources offer some potential solutions.
Okay, good. Let's hear it.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so we've got this whole new world of work.
Yeah.
People crossing borders, living in different countries,
Right.
earning income from all sorts of places.
Uh-huh.
And our tax systems seem like they're struggling to keep up.
It's a challenge for sure.
It makes me wonder, how do you even untangle that web?
Well, it's definitely a process.
Yeah.
One of the biggest issues is figuring out tax residency.
Okay.
Someone might not spend enough time in any one country to trigger the traditional residency rules.
Right.
A lot of countries use the 183-day rule.
Okay.
You stay for more than half the year. You're considered a tax resident.
Yeah.
But what about those who are bouncing around every few months, never staying in one place too long?
And I remember the sources mentioned that some digital nomads could end up being tax residents nowhere.
It's true.
What happens then? Do they just not pay taxes anywhere?
It's a real possibility.
Wow.
And it can lead to problems.
Like what?
They might miss out on tax benefits and deductions available to residents.
Right.
Plus, they could find themselves in a legal gray area,
Uh-oh.
facing uncertainty and potential penalties down the line.
So are there any solutions out there?
There are some.
Okay.
Some countries are trying some really interesting things.
Okay, like what?
For example, some are offering digital nomad visas,
Okay.
specifically designed for remote workers.
I see.
You can live and work in that country for a year or two,
Okay.
often with specific tax benefits and streamlined processes.
So it's kind of like a way to attract these global workers.
Exactly. It's a way to say, hey, come work here. We'll make it easy for you.
That sounds pretty appealing, at least on the surface.
Yeah.
But are there downsides to these visas? Do they work for everyone?
Well, there are some potential issues.
Such as?
The verdict opinion piece pointed out that these visas often have pretty high income requirements.
Oh, okay.
That can make it harder for people from developing countries to qualify.
Right, because they might not meet that threshold.
Exactly.
So it could end up exacerbating those economic disparities that already exist.
That's the concern.
It makes sense. It also seems like a temporary solution.
Right.
A visa lasts a year or two, but it doesn't really address those long-term questions of integration and sustainability.
Exactly. It's a Band-Aid, not a cure.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue with a lot of factors at play.
So we've got these visas as one approach.
Yeah.
But even if you figure out the residency question,
Right.
how do you actually tax the income these nomads are earning?
Okay.
Especially when they're working for companies in different countries or earning income from multiple sources.
This is where it gets even trickier.
Okay.
Your sources mention the concept of a permanent establishment,
Okay.
or PE.
Uh-huh.
It's a key factor in international taxation.
Okay. How so?
Basically, if a company has a fixed place of business in a country, an office, a factory, a branch,
Yeah.
it's considered to have a PE there
Okay.
and is subject to that country's tax laws.
Okay. But how does that apply to someone who basically works from their laptop,
Right.
wherever they happen to be?
Well, that's the challenge.
Yeah.
The research paper explains that even individual contractors or freelancers could be considered to have a PE in a country
Wow.
if they spend a significant amount of time working there.
So they don't need a physical office to trigger this?
Not necessarily.
That seems kind of vague.
It can be, and it can lead to disputes.
And I bet the pandemic threw a whole other wrench into the system.
Oh, absolutely.
Suddenly you had all these remote workers stuck in foreign countries.
Yeah.
Maybe for much longer than they expected.
Right.
I imagine that created some unexpected tax liabilities.
You're right. It caused a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
The UK and Singapore, for example, had to quickly update their tax residency and PE rules
Okay.
to address the unique circumstances created by the pandemic.
Wow. So we've got all these complexities with residency, PEs,
Yeah.
and income coming from all over the place.
A lot to keep track of.
It seems overwhelming even for someone who's pretty savvy about these things.
It can be.
How are digital nomads supposed to navigate this?
It definitely can be overwhelming,
Yeah.
but there are resources available.
Okay. Good.
The Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore, for example, has created some helpful guides specifically for freelancers,
Okay.
gig workers, and even social media influencers.
Wow. So they're really trying to be proactive.
They are.
Okay.
It helps break down those complex rules
Mhm.
and makes it easier to understand your tax obligations.
That's a great resource. And I imagine other countries have similar information available.
I'm sure they do.
It sounds like the key is to be proactive,
Absolutely.
to do your research and understand your obligations.
You can't just assume you'll figure it out later
Right.
when it comes to taxes. Ignorance is not bliss.
Definitely not. So we've covered residency,
Uh-huh.
PEs,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenge of taxing income from different places.
Yeah.
What about the risk of double taxation?
Okay.
If someone's considered a tax resident in 2 countries, for example,
Right.
do they get taxed twice on the same income?
That's a common concern.
Yeah.
And that's where double taxation treaties, or DTCs, come into play.
Okay.
The research paper explains how organizations like the OECD and UN have created frameworks to help countries avoid double taxation.
Okay. So these organizations are trying to create some sort of international standard.
That's exactly. They're trying to level the playing field.
Okay.
They basically determine which country gets to tax what income,
I see.
depending on the type of income, where it was earned, and the individual's residency status.
So these treaties are like a rule book for how to split up the taxing rights.
You got it.
That makes sense. But I remember the research paper mentioned that there can be issues with how these treaties are applied,
Right.
especially in a country like Russia.
Yeah, Russia's a bit of a special case.
How so?
In Russia, you can only get a tax residency certificate for a full calendar year,
Okay.
even though their DTCs and tax laws are based on spending 183 days within any 12-month period.
I see.
So a Russian digital nomad working abroad in the first half of the year
Yeah.
might not be able to apply the benefits of a DTC
Uh-oh.
and could end up paying more tax than they should.
That sounds like a real bureaucratic headache.
It can be.
So we've got these DTCs trying to prevent double taxation,
Mm-hmm.
but there are still some kinks to work out. It seems like this whole area of international taxation is ripe for innovation.
It is.
Didn't the research paper mention some interesting things happening in places like Kazakhstan,
Yes.
the Netherlands, and Japan?
Absolutely. They're experimenting with some really innovative approaches,
Such as?
using online platforms and even social media to make tax information easier to understand and access.
Wow. So they're really trying to meet people where they are?
They are.
Okay.
In Kazakhstan, for example,
Mm-hmm.
they have a state-run blog platform
Okay.
where people can ask questions directly to government officials,
Interesting.
including the head of the State Revenue Committee.
That's pretty amazing. I wouldn't expect a government to be that accessible.
That's a bold move.
And what about the Netherlands? I heard they're using Twitter to help people with their taxes.
It might sound unusual,
It does.
but it's a smart way to reach people where they are.
Yeah,
It makes tax information less intimidating and more accessible in our digital world.
I love that idea. And Japan is taking a collaborative approach, working with online platforms to collect and share tax information.
Right. They're recognizing that everyone needs to work together to make this work.
It seems like they're recognizing that to make this work, governments and platforms need to find solutions together.
Exactly. It's a new world,
Yeah.
and it requires new ways of thinking.
It makes me wonder if we're heading toward a more globalized approach to taxation in the future.
It's possible.
Will we need a system that goes beyond national borders?
It's a question worth exploring.
Yeah.
As this digital nomad movement grows,
Right.
the pressure to find those solutions will only intensify.
This is definitely a conversation we'll need to keep exploring in future deep dives. So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And remember, be a responsible citizen of the world.